and they start calling Hitler's Blitzkrieg a Sitzkrieg, believing that the German dictator was afraid to attack France. So as they brace themselves, that being the French, for an attack against the Maginot Line, no German forces are coming. And the French begin to get overconfident and cocky, and they refer to Hitler's Blitzkrieg as a Sitzkrieg, sitting on his butt because he's afraid to come and attack their fortification. Well, on April 9th of 1940, this joke ceased because Hitler demonstrated the true meaning of a lightning war in France. He sat back and let him get overconfident, and on April 9th, 1940, the Sitzkrieg joke ceased, and Hitler demonstrated the true meaning of what lightning war or Blitzkrieg was all about. To let you know how successful they were, within just weeks, the powerful German army secured the entire northern section of France, along with these 5 European countries. They conquered these areas within weeks. The northern section of France, along with Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. So on April 9th, 1940, Hitler demonstrates the true meaning of a lightning war to the country of France, and within just weeks, the powerful German army secured all of northern France, along with Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg.
How do you spell that?
Luxembourg,
Yeah.
Luxembourg. Well, France is in a pretty grave situation. And the northern part of France is going to be controlled by the German government. And French Marshal Philippe Pétain became leader of the German-controlled French government in the northern sector of France. So France was now in a grave situation, and French Marshal Philippe Pétain became the leader of the German-controlled French government. Now, you've got to have a central location, don't you, if you're Germany, if you're going to control northern France? And that German-controlled French government would be located at Vichy, France. Vichy, France. So, April 9th, Germany's kicked some butt and taken some names, right? They are now controlling the French government from Vichy. Well, what happens on June 10th, 1940? What does Italy do on June 10th, 1940? Seeing the successes of Germany. They don't invade, that's a good guess. What would you do before you invade? Declared war. So what Italy did is they declared war on both France and Great Britain, seeing an opportunity for land if they teamed up with Germany on this conquest of Europe. So on June 10th of 1940, after seeing the successes that Germany has in Europe, Italy then declares war on both France and Great Britain. Which leads us to our next subtopic, which is the Battle of Britain. A very key topic here. Battle of Britain. Now you think about this. Who are the major powers in Europe that are the good guys at this point? Britain and France. Well, France is up the creek without a paddle. So with the fall of France, here's Great Britain standing alone in Europe against Germany and Italy. They're in tough shape. Well, fortunately for Britain, on May 10th of 1940, prior to the declaration of war by Italy, England gets a new prime minister that's going to turn the tide for him. What's his name? Winston Churchill. So fortunately for the British, a month before Italy declares war on Great Britain, they elect a new prime minister by the name of Winston Churchill. And he was a great leader. He had a rare gift for leadership, and he's going to be the guy that's going to rally the British. Historians will tell you when we get through the Battle of Britain that if they have their old prime minister, this might be a whole different story. Okay? Winston Churchill instills a great leadership. He instills a great confidence. He strengthens the hope of the British citizens. He gives them a determination to fight because they know that Germany and Italy are coming. And he assures his citizens that Great Britain will never surrender. We will fight till the end. He rallies them like a good coach would rally his team. Because I'm telling you, prior to him being elected, that probably wouldn't have been the case. So by the time he was elected, in May 10th of 1940 to the end of June 1940, all he did was prepare his citizens for what he knew was coming, which turns out to be the upcoming Battle of Britain. He knows they're coming, and he's got to prepare his people. Well, in August of 1940, Adolf Hitler unleashes an all-out air attack of Great Britain, known in world history as Operation Sea Lion. August of 1940, German dictator Adolf Hitler unleashes an all-out air attack of Great Britain, known in World War II and world history as Operation Sea Lion. The idea for Hitler, his goal was to attack Great Britain. He was going to sweep the Royal Navy from the English Channel and the Royal Air Force from the skies. That was his goal. He was going to go in there and conquer Great Britain by sweeping the Royal Navy from the English Channel and the Royal Air Force from the skies. His plan was he was going to go in there by by air and ruin their Navy and their Air Force, and then what was he going to do when he got done with that? All-out invasion. So the Battle of Britain was a setup to disable the Royal Navy, to disable the Royal Air Force, so then he could go in troops on an overall invasion and crush Great Britain. Well, he underestimated Great Britain because the Royal Navy fought furiously, the British Air Force flew day and night, and they resisted like you couldn't believe, like nobody's business. And because of the determination and fortitude, commitment by the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force, Hitler postponed his overall invasion of Great Britain until the next spring. And by then, who's going to be involved he wasn't counting on? The United States of America. So that was kind of a big mistake. So the Royal Navy fought furiously, the British Air Force flew day and night, and because of this unbelievable British resistance, Adolf Hitler postpones his overall invasion of Great Britain until the next spring. Historians will tell you that was a huge mistake. He probably could have gone in there and caused some major damage, if not one. And it would have been before what? The United States ends up in the war. Okay? Well, I'll take us to our last subtopic of the day then, which is American defense measures. It's pretty interesting. Well, is the United States paying attention to this conflict in Europe? Sure we are. So we begin to make steps to strengthen our own defense in case we have to be involved. So as soon as President Roosevelt witnesses some of these things going on in Europe, he's not a stupid man. He begins to take steps. We better strengthen our own defense in case we get involved. You don't want to be unprepared. Matter of fact, it was so serious that Congress was debating the issue of instituting the first peacetime draft in American history. We had never drafted soldiers into war until we had a war to go to. This was so serious and we thought we might get involved. Not only did we strengthen our defenses, Congress was debating back and forth whether we should have the first peacetime draft in American history. Well, they didn't have the draft, but on September 16th of 1940, September 16th, 1940, President Roosevelt signed a new bill into law called the Burke Wodsworth Act. So they didn't have a peacetime draft. However, on September 16th of 1940, President Roosevelt signed into law a bill called the Burke Wodsworth Act. Anybody want to guess what the Burke Wodsworth Act might have done, considering how we're doing this lecture? What do you think?
Would it be like everyone had to sign up for the draft?
Very good. The first thing the Burke Wodsworth Act did is it required all men between the ages of 21 and 35 to register for the draft. Register. Exactly right. Now, this is a lot different than you see today. The second part of the Burke Wodsworth Act is once a man between the age of 21 and 35 registered for the draft, then he was required to take part in 1 year of military training. He wasn't drafted and wasn't technically in the military, but he was going to be trained for a year in case they had a draft, they would be ready to go. See, Roosevelt was using his head here because normally when you draft a guy during wartime, you got to train him. Remember General Pershing, did he go right over to Europe during war? No, he wanted those troops trained properly, and they damn near lost the war over there before we got there. Roosevelt thought ahead. He said, you know, we're going to register these guys for the draft, and we're going to train them so when if we do have to go, we're going. We're ready to roll. Good move. Okay? Now, what would the United States do in the meantime to help out the Allies in World War II overseas? Not going to send soldiers.
Supplies.
They're going to send supplies. Very good, Emily. So the United States was also sending aid and supplies to Great Britain during the time they were training these men between 21 and 35. Well, initially when we sent them supplies, what did Britain do? They sent us money for those supplies, right? Well, as the war continued, Great Britain was no longer able to pay us for our supplies that we were sending over. So to solve that problem, Roosevelt convinced Congress to pass another law called the Lend-Lease Act. So because Britain and eventually other countries in Europe fighting against Germany and Italy were unable to pay us for our supplies we were sending, Roosevelt convinced Congress to pass a law called the Lend-Lease Act. And this basically allowed the Allies, including Great Britain, to either lend, borrow, or lease materials they needed for the war. So no money for these required materials would be paid back until when? After the conflict ended. And if they lost, we weren't getting our money anyway, right? So Roosevelt did not want to stop giving supplies to these countries because they couldn't pay. So he passed the Lend-Lease Act, and this law allowed the Allied countries, including Great Britain, to either lend or lease materials they needed for the war, and the money for these required materials would be paid back to the United States after the conflict ended. Now, this act was passed in March of 1941, and the United States immediately spent $7 billion in money of that time for ships, planes, tanks, and other supplies that the Allies needed. So as soon as the Lend-Lease Act was passed, the United States spent $7 billion building ships, planes, tanks, and any other supplies that the Allies needed. So what are we trying to do here, kiddos, at this point in the war? Stay out of it, are we not? Well, something happens in October of 1941 that's going to kind of change the tide a little bit. Now, what do you think? Well, that's not December 7th. We know what happened then. Well, what happened in October of 1941? A German submarine torpedoed and sank an American destroyer by the name of the USS Reuben James. That happened in October of 1941, just a little bit before what? Pearl Harbor. Well, there were a lot of Americans who favored war, and they thought this event was reason enough to do so. Other Americans were against any entrance in the war. Anybody know, and we'll quit on this, an American hero, icon, that developed an organization and actually went out publicly, a rock star, so to speak, and spoke against America's entrance into World War II. He was considered a hero. He was considered a Nazi sympathizer and did not want us to get in any foreign war with Germany. Anybody knew who that hero was? I'd be surprised. Who are some American heroes, icons, that you think about? Not sports heroes, but who do you think of? Who would be an American icon in the 1940s that did something that nobody else did? This man did something nobody else did. And he got a ticker tape parade when he got back to the United States. And Charles Lindbergh, very good, spoke out vehemently against America's entrance into World War II. He started an organization and traveled the country. And he was considered a Nazi appeaser. You know who else gave a $100 donation at the time to Lindbergh's organization to help stymie us getting into the war? Very famous American we're going to spend a lot of time on this year. John F. Kennedy gave $100 to Charles Lindbergh's organization to help support his efforts in keeping the United States out of war. John Kennedy. His dad was considered a tremendous appeaser. And we'll talk about that later. What's an appeaser? Someone tries to please everybody? Okay? All right, good job. We'll continue on tomorrow. Gotta feel good about that first lecture of the year. Good participation, good learning.